Just how old is the I Ching? I'm going to give you some context and then show you just how old. So China goes way back 10,000 BC to the Yangshao culture. China is not yet China, but it's starting to develop its own culture. By about 4000 BC, agriculture starts to take shape. And shortly after that, the wheel is invented, helping people move goods easier. Around 3000 BC, we start to see the first stages of Stonehenge in England. Just about to get into the I Ching history, so to help me out guys, can you get the Ultimate I Ching, an illustrated step-by-step guide to the Book of Changes by me, Antony Cummins. Link will be in the pinned comment below. At the same time that Stonehenge is being built, we find Longshan culture, and we can just assume they have their own form of divination, but we're not 100% clear on exactly what it was. Around the year 2700 BC, the famous Yellow Emperor is born, and while part legendary, he is considered as the basis of Chinese culture. By about 2600 BC, Stonehenge stands proud in the sky. 2500 BC, the Great Pyramids of Giza are also standing. Around this time, a mythological deity called Fu Shi is said to have created the Bagua, which are the 8 trigrams, or the 8 sets of 3 lines, as you can see there. These are the basis of the I Ching. Around the year 2100, we find the first fragment of the I Ching. Now, this isn't exactly the same as the I Ching we know, but it just appears out of nowhere. We also start to see evidence of female shamanesses or spirit talkers who are speaking to the dead. There's also the use of animal bone divination, which we start to find history for. This probably went on earlier than the first I Ching, but the evidence only starts popping up around this time. We get the rise of what's known as the Shang dynasty, and they become the evil bad guys in the I Ching. Now we enter the Iron Age. Up until this point, there's no iron, and it's only now that the Iron Age starts to spread and iron moves into China. Sometime between the years 1112 BC and 1152 BC, King Wen of the Zhou dynasty is born. Now he's actually a prisoner, he's not really a king, he's actually an activist against the Shang. But what happens is he then posthumously gets elected as king. During his time in prison, he created what's known as the King Wen sequence of the I Ching. This is the standard sequence that we all know today. And around this time, animal bones give way to the yarrow stalk method. This is where sticks are used instead of putting animal bones on fires. Somewhere around the year 1000 BC, the Duke of Zhou starts to put 384 lines of text alongside the 64 hexagrams that King Wen had arranged. This is why for every hexagram you end up with 6 different lines, the bottom line, the second line, the third line, etc. While the I Ching is going around, the first Olympic Games happen in 776. In 571, Lao Tzu is born, and he writes the Tao Te Ching. And in 551, Confucius is born, and he writes the Analects of Confucius. The Buddha has been born, and his teachings start to spread throughout India. Even though Confucius has been dead for about 250 years, we start to see in the historical record the 10 Wings commentary appear, which is attributed to Confucius, but most people don't believe he actually wrote them. These commentaries were probably written later on by Confucian scholars. Now, around 200 BC, we start to see the I Ching and other things being written on silk, and one of these, which is the I Ching, is put in a tomb and will not be found for hundreds of years. Now, in 44 BC, Julius Caesar is killed in Rome by Brutus. In the year 0, 3 wise men visit a young baby who's going to become the king of the Jews. This is, of course, Jesus Christ, who is then, at the request of the Jews, killed by the Romans in 33 AD. By 249, a Chinese scholar called Wang Bi dies and leaves behind lots of commentaries on the I Ching. I couldn't find a picture of him or his writing, but here's a generic picture of the I Ching. In 570 AD, the Prophet Muhammad is born, as is Islam. Around 600 AD, the Tang dynasty take over China and the coins become more popular. This is the 3-coin method of the I Ching instead of the yarrow stalks. This is the coin method that is still used to this day by people all over the world. In the year AD 800, lots of Viking Scandinavian warriors go around the coasts of Europe attacking different settlements. Around 1100 AD, the Crusades happen and the West invades the East. Just after the year 1200 AD, the Mongols invade China. In 1347, the Black Death ravishes Europe, killing over half of the population. America is found, but then later on, Westerners start to really colonise and take over America. 1760, the Industrial Revolution starts to take shape in the north of England. In the late 1700s, both the American and the French revolutions take place. In 1882, James Legge publishes the first translation of the I Ching into English. In 1899, Richard Wilhelm falls in love with Chinese tradition and goes over to China to translate the I Ching. His translation is in full swing by 1911, but in 1914 he has to come home and he does not return or get back to China till after the war, and his publication is complete in 1923. 1939 saw war in Europe. 1950 saw Richard Wilhelm's I Ching put into English. You remember 2,000 years ago that this silk text was put in a tomb. In 1973, it is discovered again by archaeologists. Around the year 2000, the I Ching is put all over the internet on different apps and different websites and becomes accessible all over the world. In 2008, China gets the Olympics and spreads Chinese culture across the globe. And finally, in 2023, the Ultimate I Ching, an illustrated step-by-step guide to the Book of Changes, is published by Antony Cummins, which makes it accessible to the general public for the first time ever and stops it being overcomplicated. So if you've enjoyed that and it's put a little bit of Chinese history into context for you, please get yourself a copy of the Ultimate I Ching, subscribe or send me a super thanks.